The wallet felt heavy in Jason's hands. Inside, it was enough money to change his family's life, but it didn't belong to him. Jason stared at it, his heart racing, knowing this moment would define him forever. Little did he know, the decision he was about to make would set off a chain of events that would change his life in ways he could never imagine. Jason was just 14 years old, but life had already taught him lessons that many adults struggle to learn. Growing up in a small, run-down neighborhood, Jason's mother had told him his dad died shortly after he was born. He grew up with only his mother. Jason was no stranger to hard work. His mother, Elaine, worked long hours at a diner, barely making ends meet to support Jason. Money was always tight. Jason's sneakers were worn, his backpack had holes, and their refrigerator often held more empty shelves than food. But Elaine had taught Jason one thing that money could never buy: integrity. "Do what's right, Jason," she'd always say, especially when no one's looking. It was a regular school day when everything changed. Jason walked home alone, the sun casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. His mind was on dinner. Maybe they'd have enough for something special tonight. As he turned the corner near the park, something caught his eye. Lying on the grass was a wallet. It wasn't just any wallet. It was sleek, expensive looking, the kind Jason had only seen in TV shows. Jason knelt down and picked it up. His curiosity took over. Inside, his eyes widened as he found a thick wad of cash, hundreds of dollars, maybe more. Alongside the money were shiny black credit cards and a crisp driver's license. The name on the ID read Robert Kensington. Jason's heart skipped a beat. Kensington wasn't just any name. It belonged to a millionaire whose face Jason had seen on billboards around the city. Jason's thoughts raced. This money could solve so many problems. His mom wouldn't have to take double shifts anymore. He could finally have new shoes for school. And Jason himself, he had dreamed of a proper basketball for months, but it was always too expensive. But then his mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Do what's right, Jason, even when no one's watching." Jason glanced around. The park was empty. No one would know if he kept the wallet. He could walk away, and his family's struggles would ease, at least for a little while. But deep down, Jason knew the money wasn't his to take. He let out a sigh, clutching the wallet tightly. "I have to find this guy," he whispered to himself. Jason made his way home, the weight of the wallet in his hands heavier than ever. As he walked through his neighborhood, the familiar sights seemed different. The kids playing on the street, the old man fixing his car. Even the graffiti on the brick walls seemed to remind him of the choice he had to make. As Jason walked home from the park, his mind swirled with questions about what to do with the wallet. He knew it wasn't his, but the temptation lingered, especially when he thought about how much it could help his struggling family. Unable to keep the secret to himself, Jason decided to stop by his best friend Stanley's house. Stanley, always curious and full of opinions, was the first person Jason thought of for advice. But Jason had no idea the conversation would challenge his resolve even further. Jason sat on the edge of Stanley's bed, holding the sleek wallet in his hands. Stanley, sprawled out in a gaming chair, paused his game and stared wide-eyed at the thick wad of cash Jason pulled out. "Dude, are you serious right now?" Stanley exclaimed, leaning closer. "This is like a jackpot. Where did you find that?" "In the park," Jason said quietly. It was just lying there near the bench. Stanley's eyes darted between Jason and the wallet. "Man, this is insane. Do you know how much money that is? You could fix everything for your family. Your mom wouldn't have to work double shifts anymore, and you could finally get that basketball you've been wanting." Jason sighed, his grip tightening on the wallet. "Yeah, but it's not mine, Stan. It belongs to someone else. There's even an ID in here. Robert Kensington. You know, the rich guy everyone talks about." Stanley let out a low whistle. Kensington? That guy's loaded. Do you think he even notices when money goes missing? Come on, Jason, think about it. He probably has 10 more wallets just like this one. Jason shook his head firmly. It doesn't matter, Stan. It's still his. Stanley rolled his eyes, leaning back in his chair. You're too good for your own good, man. Seriously, this could change everything for you, for your mom. Think about how much easier life could be if you just kept it. Jason stared down at the wallet, the weight of Stanley's words pressing on him. For a brief moment, he considered the possibilities, the groceries they could buy, the bills they could pay, the smile it would bring to his mom's face. But then, his mom's voice echoed in his mind. Do what's right, Jason, even when no one's looking. I can't do that, Jason said finally, his voice steady. It's not who I am. Stanley threw his hands up. Man, you're too honest. You think returning that wallet is going to fix your life? What if the guy doesn't even care? What if he doesn't give you a reward or anything? Jason looked up, his eyes locking with Stanley's. Then at least I'll know I did the right thing. That's enough for me. Stanley groaned, spinning his chair around dramatically. Fine, be a saint, he said sarcastically, but don't come crying to me when nothing changes. The screen flickered as Stanley turned back to his game, but Jason knew that returning the wallet wouldn't be easy. Kensington was a busy man, surrounded by layers of security and gatekeepers. Jason didn't have a phone number, an address, or even an idea of where to start. All he had was the wallet. And yet Jason had the determination to do what was right. What Jason didn't realize was that his journey to return the wallet would lead him into challenges he'd never faced before. People would doubt him, judge him, and even try to stop him. But Jason's resolve was unshakable, and the choice he made that day would set him on a path he'd never forget. Would you have made the same choice as Jason? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And click the subscribe button now if you believe that doing what's right always pays off. Only those who don't believe in doing the right thing won't subscribe. The wallet was safe in Jason's hands, but the challenge of finding its rightful owner loomed large. How do you reach someone like Robert Kensington, a man surrounded by layers of luxury and security? Jason didn't have the answers, but he knew one thing. He couldn't give up. He decided to start with the ID in the wallet. The address on it led to an upscale office building downtown, a place far from anything Jason had ever known. The next day, with the wallet tucked securely in his backpack, Jason took the bus into the city. As he stepped off, the towering skyscrapers and bustling streets felt overwhelming, a world so different from his neighborhood. But Jason pushed through his nerves. Walking into the grand lobby of the building, he approached the marble reception desk, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'm looking for Mr. Robert Kensington. I need to return something of his." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses and an even sharper tone, glanced up briefly, before her eyes darted to Jason's scuffed sneakers and worn backpack. The receptionist's nose wrinkled slightly. Then she glanced away. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked coldly, already looking back at her computer screen. "Oh, but it's really important," Jason replied, holding up the wallet as proof. Her eyes flicked to the wallet but quickly dismissed it. "Mr. Kensington doesn't have time for random walk-ins." Jason looked at her and said firmly, "Ma'am." The receptionist's expression hardened. "Look, I don't know where you came from, but people like Mr. Kensington don't deal with people like you." Jason's stomach tightened at her words, but he stood his ground. "I'm just trying to do the right thing," he said quietly. The receptionist sighed loudly, then picked up the phone. "Security. We have a situation at the front desk. Can you please escort this individual out of the building?" she said, her tone dripping with disdain. Moments later, 2 large security guards approached. Jason backed away slightly, clutching the wallet. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he said, his voice trembling slightly. One of the guards gestured toward the door. "Let's go, kid. You heard the lady." Jason hesitated, but when one of the guards stepped closer, he knew he had no choice. With his head down and the weight of embarrassment pressing on his shoulders, Jason walked out of the building. Behind him, he could hear the receptionist mutter, "Kids these days, always looking for a handout." Standing on the sidewalk outside the building, Jason felt a wave of emotions: anger, humiliation, and even doubt. Every door he knocked on seemed to close in his face, and the world felt heavier with each rejection. Jason tightened his grip on the wallet and took a deep breath. This wasn't the end of the road, just another hurdle. He needed a new plan. Jason's next stop was a luxury car dealership. He'd seen advertisements that Robert Kensington was a major investor there, so it seemed like a logical place to try next. Inside, the showroom sparkled with brand new cars, their glossy finishes reflecting the bright lights above. Jason hesitated for a moment, then walked up to a salesman. "Excuse me, do you know where I can find Mr. Kensington?" he asked politely. The salesman chuckled, looking Jason up and down. "Kid, people like Kensington don't just walk into places like this. What do you want with him?" Jason held up the wallet. "I need to give this back to him. It's important." The salesman smirked. "Sure, kid. Why don't you leave it with me? I'll make sure he gets it." But Jason shook his head. "I have to give it to him myself." The salesman's smile faltered. "Look, kid, even if I knew where he was, I wouldn't tell you. Now why don't you run along?" Jason clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling inside him. He checked his watch, sighed, and left the dealership, feeling more discouraged than ever. Every door he knocked on seemed to close in his face. He sat on a bench outside, clutching the wallet tightly, feeling the sting of rejection. Just as he was about to give up, he overheard two employees chatting nearby. "Kensington's at that charity gala tonight," one said, laughing. "Probably giving away more money than we'll see in a lifetime." Jason's ears perked up. A gala. That might be his chance. It wasn't much of a lead, but it was all he had. With renewed determination, Jason stood up, his mind made up. He didn't know how he'd get into a high society event like a charity gala, but he was willing to try. This wasn't just about returning a wallet anymore. It was about proving that doing the right thing mattered, even when the odds were stacked against him. Would you keep going like Jason if every door seemed to close in your face? If you admire Jason's determination, hit that like button and subscribe. The most exciting part of Jason's journey is yet to come. Jason walked for several hours because he couldn't afford to take a cab to the venue. The sun dipped below the horizon as he approached the Grand Hotel hosting the charity gala. The building shimmered with lights, its entrance lined with red carpets and luxury cars. It was a world Jason had never stepped into. As he stood there clutching the wallet, he couldn't help but wonder, would they even let him in? Jason took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. Security guards in sharp uniforms stood tall, scanning everyone who entered. "Excuse me," Jason said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I need to speak with Mr. Kensington. It's really important." One of the guards raised an eyebrow, looking Jason over. "And you are?" he asked curtly. Jason held up the wallet. "I found this. It belongs to him. I just need to return it." The guard exchanged glances with his colleague before shaking his head. "Sorry, kid. This isn't the place for you. Move along." Jason's heart sank, but he refused to back down. "Please," he said, his voice firmer now. "I just need a few minutes with him." The guard crossed his arms. "I said no. Now move along before we call the cops." Just as Jason turned to leave, a woman in an elegant gown approached the guards. She had overheard their conversation and stepped in. "What's going on here?" she asked, her tone authoritative. The guard gestured toward Jason. "This kid's causing a scene. Says he's got something for Mr. Kensington." The woman looked Jason over, her gaze softening. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Jason," he replied. "I'm just trying to return this wallet. It's his, and I need to give it to him personally." The woman nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Let him in," she said firmly. The guards hesitated but ultimately stepped aside, grumbling under their breath. Jason followed the woman into the dazzling venue, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. The sound of music filled the air as Jason took in his surroundings. The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the room. Guests in elegant attire mingled, their laughter and conversation filling the space. For a moment, Jason felt completely out of place. Clutching the wallet tightly, he scanned the room for Robert Kensington. His gaze landed on a man at the center of a small crowd, tall, impeccably dressed, and exuding an air of authority. It had to be him. Jason approached cautiously, weaving through the crowd. When he finally reached Kensington, he hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Excuse me, sir," Jason said, his voice steady but quiet. "I think this belongs to you." Kensington turned, his expression initially one of confusion. Jason held out the wallet. A flash of recognition crossed Kensington's face. He took the wallet, flipping it open and inspecting its contents. "Everything's here," Kensington said, his tone surprised. He looked up at Jason. "You found this?" Jason nodded. "Yes, sir. I wanted to make sure it got back to you." The guests nearby watched the exchange with curiosity, some whispering among themselves. Kensington's expression softened. "You could have kept this," he said, his tone filled with curiosity. "Why didn't you?" Jason met his gaze, standing tall despite the eyes on him. "Because it wasn't mine," he said simply. "My mom always says doing the right thing is what matters most." The room grew quiet, the weight of Jason's words settling over the crowd. Kensington stared at the boy, his face unreadable at first, but then it broke into a smile. "Happy," he said. "What's your name?" "Jason," he replied. "Well, Jason, you've done something extraordinary tonight," Kensington said, his voice warm. "Come with me. Let's talk." As Kensington led Jason to a quieter corner of the room, the crowd buzzed with speculation. Who was this boy? What could he possibly have to say to one of the city's most influential men? Jason didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing. This night was far from over. Have you clicked the subscribe button? Do it now to not miss out on these inspiring stories. Jason sat across from Robert Kensington in a quiet corner of the opulent ballroom. The hum of the gala faded into the background as Kensington studied the boy in front of him. Jason, clutching his worn backpack tightly, didn't waver under the millionaire's piercing gaze. Little did Jason know, this moment would reveal far more than just his character. It would expose truths that would leave everyone stunned. Before Kensington could speak, Evelyn, one of the event coordinators, approached the pair. She had been watching Jason from the moment he entered, her suspicions heightened by his modest. "Mr. Kensington," Evelyn said with urgency, glancing pointedly at Jason. "I've been keeping an eye on this boy. Are you sure he's not up to something? We've had issues with theft before." Jason's eyes widened, his heart pounding at the sudden accusation. Kensington frowned, holding up the wallet. "This boy just returned something I thought was lost forever," he said firmly. "Why would you assume he's a thief?" Evelyn stammered, her face reddening. "Well, he doesn't look like he belongs here," she muttered. Kensington's expression hardened. "And what does someone who belongs here look like, Evelyn?" he asked coldly. Evelyn wasn't done. She crossed her arms, her voice rising. "Look, I'm just saying, He could have taken the wallet and decided to return it for a reward. People do that all the time. Jason finally spoke up, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "I didn't do this for a reward," he said. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." The room fell silent. Kensington leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Jason. "You've got guts, kid," he said. "Evelyn, I suggest you stop talking before you embarrass yourself further." Kensington turned his attention back to Jason, his expression softening. "Tell me, Jason," he said. "Why go through all this trouble to find me?" Jason hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Honestly, because it was the right thing to do and because my family needs people like you to know we're not what people assume we are," Jason said. Kensington's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" he asked. Jason took a deep breath, the weight of his words heavy. "People look at us and think we're trouble, that we're out to steal or cheat. But we're not. My mom works 2 jobs just to keep us going. We don't have much, but we have our values, and I wasn't going to let someone like her down." Kensington sat back, visibly moved by Jason's honesty. The room, once filled with whispers and judgmental stares, now buzzed with quiet admiration for the boy's courage. Kensington stood, his towering presence commanding attention from everyone in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising his voice slightly, "I want you all to meet Jason. This young man went out of his way to return something valuable to me, something he could have easily kept for himself. But what's even more valuable is his integrity, something this world desperately needs more of." Applause erupted throughout the room, the sound echoing against the grand walls. Jason, though overwhelmed, stood tall beside Kensington. But Kensington wasn't finished. He turned to Evelyn, his voice icy. "And as for you, Evelyn, your behavior tonight has been unacceptable. Judging someone based on their appearance is not only unprofessional, it's disgraceful." Evelyn's face turned pale as she stammered for words, but Kensington waved her off. "There's no place for prejudice in my company," he said firmly. "Effective immediately, you're relieved of your position." Evelyn's face paled further as she stammered, but Kensington didn't let her speak. "Good, help me up," he added. As the applause died down, Kensington placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. "Jason," he said, "people like you inspire me. And I want to help your family, just like you helped me." Jason's eyes widened as Kensington pulled out a sleek black card and handed it to him. "Take this," he said. "It's a direct line to me. Whatever you and your family need, I'll make it happen." As Jason walked out of the gala that night, the weight of the wallet finally lifted from his hands. But in its place was something much greater, a newfound sense of hope and the knowledge that doing what's right truly matters. Little did Jason know, his story would go on to inspire not just those in the room, but countless others, proving that even the smallest act of honesty can create ripples of change. Smiling deliberately, he lowered his gaze as he walked home. The city lights flickered in the distance, and in his pocket was the sleek black card Kensington had given him, a tangible reminder of how far he had come. But the greatest reward wasn't material. It was the pride in knowing he had done the right thing, even when it was hard. As Jason stepped through the door, his mother Elaine was waiting for him, her face filled with a mix of worry and relief. "Jason, where have you been?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jason smiled and pulled out the black card. "Mom, you're not going to believe what happened," he said. He sat down and recounted the entire story, from finding the wallet, to being thrown out of buildings, to the gala, and finally meeting Robert Kensington. Elaine listened intently, her eyes welling up with tears as Jason described Kensington's offer to help. "Was you the woman I once knew?" Elaine, still in shock, stepped back, trying to process the unexpected visitor. "Rob, I can't believe it's really you, Elaine whispered, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? Kensington, looking at her with a mixture of fondness and sincerity, smiled. I came to meet the woman who raised such an extraordinary son. Jason told me about your hard work, about the sacrifices you've made for him. You taught him the values that led him to do the right thing. Jason, still standing in the doorway, felt a knot form in his stomach. This was a side of his mother he'd never known. She had always been strong, always protected him from the past. But here was someone who seemed to know her in ways Jason hadn't imagined. Kensington continued, I want to help. I've arranged for a scholarship for Jason to attend any school of his choice. And this, he said, gesturing to the box of money and flowers, is just a small token. I know it won't solve everything, but I hope it will make life a little easier for you both. Elaine's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at the flowers and money, her heart overwhelmed with emotion. She had always struggled to provide, working long hours just to keep their family afloat. But now it seemed like a door had opened, one she never expected to find. Thank you, Elaine said, her voice barely above a whisper. But you don't have to do this. Kensington shook his head, his expression soft. It's not about money, Elaine. It's about giving back. Jason showed me that even when life is difficult, there's always room to do what's right. I want to make sure he has every opportunity to succeed. Jason, still processing the turn of events, looked at his mother and then back at Kensington. Are you sure? I never expected any of this. Kensington smiled warmly, placing a hand on Jason's shoulder. I'm sure. You earned it, Jason. You have something special, and I want to make sure you never lose that sense of integrity. Elaine, now holding the bouquet tightly in her hands, gave Jason a long, thoughtful look. I never imagined. We've been through so much, and now this. Jason met her gaze and smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. I did the right thing, Mom. And look, things are starting to change. It was a moment of realization for both of them. They had been struggling for so long, but in doing the right thing, Jason had found a way to change their lives forever. And now, with Robert Kensington's help, a new chapter was beginning. One filled with hope, opportunity, and the knowledge that even in the darkest times, integrity could light the way. Here's your revised and properly punctuated version. Was that you, Elaine? We lost contact after high school. I searched for you after I came back from college, but you were nowhere to be found. I thought you'd moved on? Elaine's hands trembled as she gestured for him to sit. Robert, I didn't move on, she said quietly. I didn't even know where to find you, and I had no way to tell you. I was pregnant. What? Jason's eyes widened as he looked at his mother. Pregnant? He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Elaine nodded, tears streaming down her face. Jason, Robert is your father. The room fell into stunned silence as the weight of Elaine's words sank in. Robert looked at Elaine, his eyes filled with a mix of joy, regret, and disbelief. Jason is my son? He asked softly. Elaine nodded slowly. Yes. I got pregnant after that night we had together, but there was no way I could tell you. I had to tell Jason you were dead so that he wouldn't ask me questions about you. Robert stood, his voice firm. Elaine, Jason, I had no idea, but now that I do, I promise to make up for lost time. I'm not letting either of you go again. In the days that followed, Robert moved mountains to ensure his newfound family had everything they needed. He bought Elaine a new home, provided Jason with the best education, and spent every moment he could reconnecting with them. But more than the material changes, it was the emotional bond they built that truly transformed their lives. For the first time, Jason had a father, and Elaine had the support she had always dreamed of. Their lives changed forever. Meanwhile, Jason's story continued to inspire millions. The viral video of his act of honesty now carried an even deeper message, one of resilience, family, and the unexpected twists of life. Jason's life was forever changed, not just by the wallet, but by the choices he made. He learned that doing the right thing doesn't just bring rewards. It brings connections, hope, and sometimes unexpected miracles. And as he looked at his new home, his loving mother, and his reunited family, Jason knew one thing for sure. Life has a way of rewarding those who choose integrity over convenience. If Jason's incredible journey moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that doing what's right can lead to the most beautiful surprises. Together, we can spread messages of hope, resilience, and love.